Hello and welcome to the third module for the Model as a Master PAL series for Vermilion Association for Special Education and Middle Fork School. Today we're going to be talking about the M in Master, which stands for motivate. So we're going to be talking all about motivation and why we communicate. Okay, so we know the acronym for Master PAL. M is that first M in master. It stands for motivate. We've talked about what a master is and what a PAL is, what AAC is, and then what the Communication Bill of Rights is and why it's important. And the reason we're doing all of this is because our students have the right to be taught how to communicate. Okay, so let's get on to motivation. Okay, so I want you to think about all of the different ways that you might reward yourself for big and little challenges in your life. So we all have things that we do that kind of keep us going, especially when things are tough. So it might be something little like, the promise of chocolate, or having a glass of wine when you get home, or binge watching a TV show on the weekend. So it's important to recognize that kids need to know what their hard work is getting them. They need to know that their hard work is valued and worth it. And using AAC can be hard work, especially when you are first learning how to use it. Okay. The next thing I want you to think about is what do you do in a social interaction when the topic is not of interest to you? So let's pretend you're at a party or at a staff meeting or another social event, and the topic turns to something that you're not interested in or it doesn't apply to you. Most people kind of shut down and don't pay attention. They certainly don't engage in any kind of meaningful way. So you might listen, but you probably don't. You might start thinking about all of the things that you need to be getting done. You might start kind of daydreaming about what else you would prefer to be doing. You might even walk away. You might check your phone, send a text. You might go get a drink. You might start a conversation with someone else. So bottom line, communication is inherently self-motivated. If you're not interested in what's going on or what's being discussed, chances are you're not going to engage in a super meaningful way. So if we're interested in an interaction, we're more likely to participate in it. Okay. When you're getting ready to do something tough, we all kind of give ourselves pep talks. What does that pep talk sound like in your head? So oftentimes people will say things like, if I do this thing that I really hate, then I can get this. You might chunk the task into smaller, more manageable pieces. You might give yourself a goal or a deadline. So I'm going to try to get all my laundry done by Saturday evening. If we're going along with the laundry idea, if I do the laundry, then I can have a snack afterwards. You might chunk that task down. So I am going to just match the socks first. And then after that, I'll fold the shirts, and then I'll fold the pants, and then I'll put them all away. Like maybe I'm giving myself a short break in between each of those tasks. So when we use those strategies, though, we're applying our executive function skills. It's important to help kids learn how to do those things for themselves, but also honor their human limitations, which are probably different than ours, right? I know that I really stink at working ahead of a problem. So I need a deadline in order to finish a task. I need big tasks to be broken up into smaller, more manageable chunks. Otherwise, I cannot get them done. So, and remember, when we're no longer interested in something, it's no longer communication. It becomes compliance. So if we're not interested in interaction, but we're going along with it, it's just because we feel like we should go along with it. It's not because we really want to go along with it. So it just becomes compliance as opposed to communication. So for kids who, or individuals or students who use AAC, generating messages can be really hard work. So we have to make it worth it for them. We have to make it worth it for them to put forth the effort. Communication is not an easy thing for them to engage in. So we have to make sure that we are making it something that they want to engage in, so that they want to put forth the effort to do it. Okay. So what does it mean to be motivated or to have motivation? So motivation is the reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way. It's also the general desire or willingness of someone to do something. Motivation can be intrinsic, it can be extrinsic, and it can also be related to just our inherent readiness to do an activity. So when we think about intrinsic motivation, this is things like if we're interested in the activity, if we think we're going to get like a sense of satisfaction out of it, if we're going to get some social connection out of it, those are intrinsic motivators. When we think of extrinsic motivation, we're thinking of things like praise, reward, money, fame. So things like even food are extrinsic motivators. And then inherent readiness. So this is kind of the comfort and confidence that comes along with routines or predictable structures. So it's having the ability to complete something and knowing that you're going to be successful at it. So if I'm given a big assignment to do, I am never ready to do a big assignment that has not been broken down into manageable chunks. If I'm given a big assignment that's been broken down into manageable chunks, then I am far more motivated to do it because I know what steps I need to take in order to complete it. That big assignment is too much for me. It's too much for me to understand. It feels too overwhelming. So I'm not motivated to get started on it because I don't even really know where to start. So think about the supports that we can put into place to help students feel like they are ready to take on a task, that they're ready to anticipate what's next, and that they understand what the expectations are. So when we're thinking about the different types of motivation, also, we need to think about what type of motivation is going to give us the most bang for our buck. So when we're thinking about kind of starting off on a journey, maybe an extrinsic reward is going to be really beneficial. So if you think about why you come to your job. So like a paycheck is pretty important when we're talking about a job. But for anybody that's been in a job that makes them miserable, we know that a paycheck doesn't keep us in a job. It's something that kind of gets us in the door. What keeps us in a job is interest, job satisfaction, social connection with our peers, social connection with the people that we work with, right? And also feeling like we are making a difference, feeling like we are able to perform the tasks that we're asked to, and that we have clear expectations, things along those lines. So when we're thinking about making meaningful long-term change, when it comes to behavior, when it comes to communication, really when it comes to anything, we need to think about building that intrinsic motivation. If we are only ever focused on extrinsic motivation, research tells us, the data regarding performance tells us that focusing on extrinsic rewards will ultimately kill our interest, satisfaction, and our social connection. If you are paid to do something, and that's why you're showing up, and there's no intrinsic motivation to kind of fuel your participation. If that pay doesn't keep up, I mean, granted, if we all stopped getting paid, we probably wouldn't continue to come to work. But when you remove that reward, you're far less likely to see a continuation of that behavior if there's no intrinsic motivation. Okay, same with if we remove supports too early. So down here in this corner, we have like a visual schedule for a child getting ready in the morning. If they can get ready independently with that visual schedule and it's able to kind of coach them through that routine, and we think, oh, they can do this on their own, and we take that visual schedule away too early or at all, sometimes too early is at all, we could kill motivation because they just don't know what to do then. That was what was helping them participate in that activity. Okay, so something else that is important when we're thinking about motivation is this idea of joint attention. And I think I touched on this in one of the previous modules as well. So joint attention or shared attention is just shared focus between two people on the same object or activity. So we know that we have joint attention when one individual kind of alerts another to an object or activity by means of a variety of ways. So this can be by eye gaze, by pointing, it can be using spoken language, it could be using a communication device, it could be showing an object, or using other nonverbal indications. Grabbing a hand and pulling you over to something. There's a lot of ways that we can show joint attention. We used to think that there were prerequisites to joint attention, and that one of the prerequisites to establishing joint attention was getting eye contact, because that's how neurotypical people, kids who are following the typical developmental trajectory, that's how they start to show joint attention. They do something called triadic eye gaze, where they'll look at the person that they want to engage with, they'll look at the object, and then they look back at the person to kind of check in, and it's like a back and forth. They form this triangle between them and the person that they're engaging with, and then the activity or the object that they're both attending to. We now know that eye contact is not a prerequisite for joint attention. You can get joint attention in a lot of different ways. You do not need somebody to stare in your eyeballs to show you that they are attending to the same thing that you are attending to. So then another thing is kind of having a readiness for learning or a readiness for communicating. So this is just the quality of being able or willing to learn. So behavioral characteristics can include things like attention to a person or an interaction, awareness of lesson components or awareness of the communication partner, and an overall willingness to engage in communicative interactions or learning activities. So I will say from birth, everybody is ready to communicate. They might not be ready to communicate in a specific situation. So there are not prerequisites for teaching communication skills. There are considerations to be taken into account when we are trying to motivate somebody to communicate in a situation, but we wouldn't say that they're not ready for communication in that situation. We would say this activity is not motivating enough for them to want to communicate, if that makes sense. Okay, so one useful theory to kind of take into account when we're talking about communication is this idea of self-determination. So self-determination is a motivational theory that describes how people make decisions and control their lives. So there's three components of it. There's autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy means that you have some amount of choice and control in your life. Competence means that you're effective in your environment or in an activity. It means that you're able to do things, right? And you're able to do them well. And then relatedness is a connection to others and a sense of belonging. So that's those relationships that we build. So this is how we build intrinsic motivation. We build autonomy, we build competence, and we build relatedness. So this is kind of how to think about how those three components winds up helping kids engage in communication and engage in learning. So if we build autonomy, competence, and relatedness, if we give kids that experience, what that fosters is volition, motivation, and engagement. So by focusing on those three things, we get kids who take initiative to do things of their own volition, do things without us asking them to. They're motivated to do things, and they're engaged in what they're doing. So they're engaged with us and they're engaged with an activity. Then when we build autonomy, competence, and relatedness. That's what we focus on to begin with. We kind of get volition, motivation, and engagement from that. And then that results in enhanced performance. So we have students who are, just by the fact that they're more engaged, they're more motivated, we get enhanced performance. We get enhanced persistence because they have some feeling of competence. They know that they can do some things. So we kind of build their confidence in that way. We build their motivation to engage, and they're more likely to stick with something when it's hard. Then we also build some creativity. We get some creativity from students in the different ways that they'll try to communicate. So they will be more willing to try different ways to get their point across if we show them that we have that social connection. We want to understand what they're saying, that their words are going to allow them to have some control over their environment or have some choice in what happens to them, and that they've been successful at communicating before, not necessarily with a communication device, maybe with their behavior. Okay. So when we think of engagement really is an agent of change. There's three types of engagement. There's behavioral engagement, cognitive engagement, and emotional engagement. So behavioral engagement is just, what are you doing in an activity? Cognitive engagement is, what are you thinking about? And then emotional engagement is, how are you feeling about it? Okay, so when we have a student who's behaviorally engaged, emotionally engaged, and cognitively engaged, and these, all of that's kind of working, their brain tells them that they're engaged in something positive, and they get a release of dopamine, which is just a neurochemical that makes you feel good. So good feelings emerge, and then you start to seek out more opportunities to feel that way. So you seek out when you have some success with engagement, you get that release of dopamine, you feel good about it, and then you're more likely to reach out and try to be engaged again. So what happens in the long term is that learning happens, relationships grow, and overall, a student's quality of life is improved. Those are kind of our long-term goals, right? Okay. So if we think about this kind of engagement triangle of behavior, cognition, and emotion, extrinsic motivators don't really make this list. Our reinforcers, things that we give to students for performing well, so like stickers or candy or grades, those are all kind of outside of this engagement triangle. They might help for getting that initial engagement, but they're not going to create lasting long-term change. Okay. So motivation is the key to engagement across life's activities. If you're not motivated, you're not going to communicate. So you need to be motivated in order to communicate. You need to be motivated in order to learn anything. If you don't know why you're learning something, chances are it's not really going to stick with you if you're not motivated to do it. You need to be motivated in order to physically access something. I certainly have access to a wide variety of workout equipment and gyms in my community. I am not motivated to access them, so I'm not going to. If I had some sense of internal motivation, I might go and hop on a treadmill. I mean, there's one in my basement. But I do not right now have the internal motivation to do that. Motivation is key for attention. If you're not motivated to engage in an interaction, your attention is going to go all over the place, right? Think about sometimes when we sit in meetings or when we sit in trainings that we don't necessarily feel like apply to us. Maybe this one for you. And if that's the case, I apologize. Your attention is going to go all over the place. You're going to be thinking about your grocery list or the fact that your tire was low on air this morning and you need to remember to air it up. Like your attention is going to wander. Motivation is key to organizing time, space, tasks, and responsibilities. So if I'm motivated to do things, I'm going to prioritize what I'm motivated to do. I'm going to organize the amount of time that I spend on something based on how motivated I am. I'm gonna change the way that I organize my space based on how motivated I am to do an activity. I need to be motivated to seek out opportunities and experiences. If I come to school every day and I'm kind of like not super excited about going to school and I don't have a lot of positive interactions with the grownups that I'm working with, I'm probably not going to try to seek out more opportunities and experiences at school. Okay, so what happens when we have a lack of motivation? We have decreased learning. We have students who wind up being disinterested in communication because in the case of AAC, the use of their communication device becomes a compliance task as opposed to a communicative task. We see an increase in negative behaviors. And then we see kind of an increase in learned helplessness. So we have students who wind up being dependent upon others to do things for them because we haven't put the right supports in place for them to understand that they can do things on their own. Or we have put those supports into place, but we never quite let them do things on their own. We don't give them the time or the space to kind of figure out how to do it on their own. Okay, so motivation can be elicited by, how do we get motivation? So we consider individual interests to invite engagement. So are they interested in dinosaurs? Are they interested in the color purple? Are they interested in things that spin or being outside? I saw something just today about how when we're thinking about what kids are interested in, it's easier to think about the noun that they're interested in as opposed to the verb, so what they do with that interest. So if we're thinking about trains, we might think, okay, we're just going to focus on train. I'm going to get books about trains. I'm going to get some train toys. I'm going to get a train table. I'm going to put train stickers everywhere, without really thinking about what it is that they're doing when they're playing with trains, or what it is that they're interested in when they're playing with trains. Do they like, so instead of focusing on the noun of the interest, trains, focus on the verbs, the actions that come out of that interest. So with trains, you have things like linking things together. You have moving things from one place to another. You have listening to the sound of the train on the tracks. You have the hoo hoo, the noise of the horn. So you have a lot of listening. You have linking, you have hitching, you have loading up things into the cars. You have maybe riding, you have driving a train, lots of different actions that can kind of help figure out maybe more what the motivation is, as opposed to just the thing. Sometimes the thing is motivating, but sometimes it's more what you're doing with the thing that's motivating, or what you're experiencing with the thing that's motivating. We can also get motivation by providing repetition, but with variety. So we might be using the same routine, just with new materials. And so we're creating a familiar routine, but still introducing some novelty to it. So that can get motivation out of kids. If we're doing the same activity over and over and over and over, that gets really boring. But if you can kind of build that framework of this is the structure of the activity that we're doing, this is the routine of the activity that we're doing, and we just change out different elements to make it kind of newer and exciting, we can get some motivation there. Also, responding to student cues when they initiate a social interaction or when social behaviors are observed. So if a student comes up and taps you on the shoulder, acknowledging and saying, hey, hi, I really want to talk to you, but right now I'm busy. So acknowledging and responding to student cues. If you have a student who, when you walk in the room, they're really looking at you, but they aren't saying anything, you can still respond to that social cue. You can say, I see you looking at me. And that can elicit some motivation because they understand that you see them. And that you value their input and what they're doing, kind of how they're acting in the world. You can also get motivation sometimes by just taking off the pressure. So back off and give the student the room they need to figure it out. That shows them that you have some faith in the idea that they will be able to figure it out. Now, I'm not saying leave them to flounder and get frustrated, but maybe you show them a part of what they're trying to do and then back off and see if they can do it. Using an appropriate level of prompting to make it doable. And giving them an appropriate level of challenge. So making sure that the activities that you're presenting aren't too easy and also aren't too hard, which can be tough. But we think that's what we do as educators. Some of you might be familiar with the concept of the zone of proximal development. So it's something that's just attainable with some measure of instruction and support. It's not way up here where it's going to be creating a lot of frustration, and it's not way down here where they can do it on their own with absolutely no effort. We want things to be we want things to take a little bit of effort, but not so much that it's going to create frustration to the point where kids are going to shut down because it's too hard. As far as prompting goes, yes, prompting is necessary sometimes, but if I can point to something silently and get the response that I want, then I don't need to layer on a whole lot of spoken language. I don't need to say, look here, look at this thing. No, you need to do this right here. If I can just point and wait, and that is what's going to, and that's going to support the student in completing an activity, then that's an appropriate level of prompting. Also providing boundaries that are attainable, predictable, and maybe a choice. So when you are presenting activities, giving students the amount of choice that you're comfortable giving. So maybe these are the 3 activities that we're doing. You can pick which one you want to do first, second, and third. It doesn't really matter to me. These are the 3 activities that we're doing. You can decide which one you want to do before math, or which one you want to do before we go to PE, and which one you're going to do after we go to PE. But we're going to get through these 3 activities. Maybe it's you can decide whether you want to sit at your desk and complete it, or whether you want to come sit at the table with me and complete it, or whether you want to sit on the floor and complete it. So figuring out ways to introduce choice can be really powerful. Motivation can be elicited by reinforcing constructively. So often we reinforce by saying something like, good job, that was great. Nice work. And those are fine. It's not bad to praise that way. But we're not really giving any meaningful feedback when we do that. We're not telling them what it is that they did that we liked. So instead of good job, I might say something like, I like how you tried really hard. That was tricky. I love that you stuck with that, even though it seemed a little frustrating. I love that you asked for help when that felt really tough. I like how you kept your letters in the line there when you were writing. Nice work there. I like that you are looking all around your device to find the word that we're looking for. So giving specific feedback. So when I think about when I'm observed for my evaluation at work, if I get feedback that's just, that was a great lesson, like that's nice, but it doesn't really help me continue to improve. So if I get feedback that's more, I really love that you tried to engage every student in different ways. So you knew that this student needed you to go up close to them. You knew that this student needed a little bit of, gentle physical contact in order to engage. That way I know that what I did is what's being identified as something positive, as opposed to just, that was great job. And then establishing a positive and respectful relationship. So we need students to understand that we believe in them and that we want to hear what they have to say. I know that sometimes our ears and our brains are super tired, but we need our students to understand that we respect them as human beings, and that we believe in their ability, and that we want to hear what they have to say. We want to hear what they have to say, regardless of whether it's positive or negative. Okay, so how do we convey I believe in you? We can convey I believe in you by our tone of voice. We can convey I believe in you with our body language. We can convey I believe in you with our facial expressions, which can be a little bit tricky with our masks. But we can overcome that. There are other ways that we can convey I believe in you. We can also use words to express understanding, to express patience, to express transparency and vulnerability, and to establish helpful boundaries. So to express understanding, I know this is really hard. I'm really proud of you for sticking with this, even though it's tough. I know that you don't like math. I know that school is not your favorite place to be right now. That's how we express understanding. I know that your bus ride to school this morning was pretty rough. I'm sorry that happened. Patience, letting kids know that we are going to let them take their time. Particularly for our kids that are learning AAC, their communication is going to be slow. We need to let them know that they are worth waiting for. Like their message is worth waiting for. If we have to attend to something else while they're generating their message, we can say something like, I want to hear what you have to say, but I need to go take care of this. I will be right back. And then I want you to tell me what you're going to say. Okay. Transparency and vulnerability. So letting kids know when you're having a tough time. I'm feeling really cranky today, so I'm going to need some help to remember some of my coping strategies. I might need a reminder to take a deep breath. I forgot something at home today, so I'm going to have to figure out what we're going to do instead. That's that transparency and vulnerability. And then establishing helpful boundaries. You can say things like, you know what, I know that you can handle this on your own, so I'm going to wait right now and let you try. And then If you really feel like you're struggling, I'll come and help. But that's a helpful boundary. Not you can do it. You know how to do that. Because maybe they do. Maybe they knew how to do it yesterday, but something has changed a little bit today and they don't quite remember how to do it. Okay. One thing we need to remember is that devices are not the activity. So our communication devices are not the activity. Karen Kangas is an occupational therapist who kind of talks about motivation and purpose. So motivation and purpose are going to come before access. Access literally means just using the device. So we have to establish motivation. We have to establish purpose before we can expect our kids to use the systems that we're putting in front of them. So novelty can create interest, something that's new, something that's not something that's their favorite. That can be motivating too, but also something that's new can create interest. Interest is a necessary component of engagement. So interest is a necessary component of learning. If you are not interested in what we are presenting to you, you are not going to take the time and the energy to get that information into your brain in a way that's meaningful. And then teaching the beginning, the middle, and the end of an activity builds neural pathways to facilitate learning and independence. Not only that, but especially for our kids with autism, teaching them what the beginning of an activity is, the middle of an activity, and the end of an activity. It helps them understand there's an end to this. It helps them understand when that transition's coming up so that they're not feeling anxious about this activity is going to go on forever, or this activity might end at the drop of a hat and I'm really enjoying it. So if we build in that routine, if we teach the beginning, middle, and end, we are able to facilitate independence because we can let them take over the beginning, let them take over the middle, let them take over the end. You're kind of chunking that activity down while also kind of controlling some of the anxiety and the transition issues. Okay, so ultimately communication is about engagement in all different forms. So you want to be a communication partner who engages meaningfully. And if you engage meaningfully, kids will be motivated to engage with you. Okay, so let's recap. We're going to kind of recap the information from the last 3 sessions. AAC is an umbrella term. So it's not just one support, it's a system of supports that we put into place. Modeling, when we're talking about modeling, it means that we are speaking our own words. We are not putting words into the mouths of our students. When we're thinking about motivation, we need to think about the 3 different aspects of motivation. So extrinsic, those things that happen outside of us, that's things like rewards, money, those kind of things. We have the intrinsic motivation, which is kind of just the satisfaction of participating, the social connectedness that we get from things, and then the inherent readiness that we have. So are we able to even do this successfully? If I'm not sure if I can do it successfully, and I'm not sure that you're going to be all that great of a coach and getting me to do this successfully, then I'm not going to be motivated to participate in it. So we need to make sure that we are kind of showing up as a supportive partner during new activities with our kids. A lack of motivation can result in undesired behaviors. And then communication doesn't happen without purpose. Motivation is always a factor, and it's intrinsic to authentic communication. Okay, I think that's it. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me by email, track me down at school. I will probably tell you to email me though. So feel free to reach out. Let me know what your questions are. Let me know if you have any concerns about anything, if there's any specific situations in your classroom that you feel like you need to need some help troubleshooting, just let me know. So I look forward to continuing this learning journey with you, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this. Thanks.